Well, hello, welcome back. Today I'd like to chat about a recent video posted by Dr. Christy Winters. The video is titled Response to Comments on Is Feminism Still Needed in the West? Now, the reason why I think it's worth responding to this video is that Dr. Winters presents it as an effective rebuttal of recent criticisms in relation to the video Is Feminism Still Needed in the West? In fact, in the description, she says, there are times when someone else makes a point better than I can, and when that happens, I step out of the way so their voice can be heard. Such is the case with my latest video. She obviously holds this response in high regard, so let's have a look at it.
The Thoughts of Daisy Pumpkin 23. A fool sees not the same tree that a wise man sees. The reactions of people to this video, as evidenced in the comments section here, in response videos to this one, and in the comments sections of the response videos, are startling proof of a lot of the mental problems that many anti-feminists have. I'm almost tempted to say, although I don't like to speculate on people's motives unless they themselves have overtly stated them, that Christy didn't actually want her question to be answered, that, in fact, the act of asking these questions was a statement in itself.
Right, we'll pause here because an important point has been made. The author suggests that Dr. Winters' previous video was not made with the intention of soliciting a response from the viewership. The video was made as some form of rhetorical exercise that required no response whatsoever. Now, this is very convenient, isn't it? Because now the author can blame the respondents for responding to the video, and she can also challenge them on the responses that they make. Well, this is a very dubious position to take intellectually, isn't it? Anyway, we'll continue.
And the hilarious responses from commenters further substantiate her statement. Perhaps the combination of the video and resulting comments and reactions constitute a feminist situationist art prank in itself. She sets out to expose the stupidity of anti-feminist commenters, and in their droves they swarm in like rats, happy to oblige in exposing their own stupidity. She could now compile a book from these comments and comments elsewhere, and it would be a very telling expose of the mental deficiencies of so many anti-feminist commenters. Perhaps Christy is an evil puppet mistress, playing all the moronic commenters in a huge psychological experiment like laboratory rats. Whatever her motives, the end result has been an amazing expose of the common mental failings of so many anti-feminists. I shall elaborate on that shortly. Well done, anti-feminists. You might as well have written "I is stupid" on your forehead.
Now the author makes the suggestion that perhaps, maybe, the video was made as some form of feminist art. It was a prank, perhaps. So we've got, it may have been a rhetorical video that required no response whatsoever. It may have been an art prank designed to entrap the unwary and the stupid. So we've got at least three choices of how to regard the previous video, haven't we?
Black marker pen. Putting aside any speculations on Christy's motives, taking her video just at face value, and working from the assumption that the questions were asked in the genuine spirit of inquiry, the tone and volume of responding comments, and the fact that not one single person has attempted to answer the questions is very revealing of a huge flaw in the anti-feminist camp. I have lost count of how many times I have seen anti-feminist commenters claim feminism is no longer needed in the West because women here have achieved equality, regardless of whether or not the feminist they are addressing has made a claim to the contrary.
Now, pause there for a moment, please, because this is just disingenuous, isn't it? Regardless of whether or not the feminists they're addressing has made a claim to the contrary. Well, should I refer you to the dictionary definition of feminism? Let's have a look and see what it says. The Oxford English Dictionary defines feminism as the advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of the equality of the sexes. So by definition, if you self-label as a feminist, you are advocating for equality. One presumes that such equality has yet to be attained. Otherwise, why feminism? So that's just a dishonest statement to make, isn't it? There's no other way of looking at it, really. Continue.
Yet, as this video and the reactions to it prove, when asked to substantiate that claim, they all run around like headless chickens, trying to disguise their terror at being put on the spot by spouting spurious and misused academic terms that only further demonstrate their mental failings. The first and most common mental failing I see with so many anti-feminists is their inability to understand context and underlying meaning. They take everything at its most dullard, oversimplified either-or, and can't grasp underlying meaning or overall context unless it is spelled out to them in words of one syllable. This is vividly illustrated by all the morons arguing here and elsewhere, such as in other comment sections beneath response videos, about burden of proof, to say nothing about the morons who are misusing the term null hypothesis. A common thing that is being said is, paraphrasing, "The burden of proof is on you, Christy, because you are the one claiming that feminism is needed in the West." This claim is also effectively being made in some of the moronic comments blathering on about rebuttal. This is proof that a very high number of anti-feminists can't understand context. This video is a standalone project, and responses to it should only relate to what is being asked or said in the video itself. Whether or not Christy may have asserted some claim in the past, or feminists have said, and other such associative fallacies, is irrelevant. In a fair and honest debate, everything that a speaker may or may not have asserted in a previous debate should have no bearing on how we judge the relative merits of what they are saying in a particular debate.
Well, we'll stop there because that's nonsense, isn't it? Because the original video was not in the form of a debate. There was no argument contained within that video. The video was simply a challenge. There were 3 questions that Dr. Winters insisted that people answer. That is not a debate. It was a series of complex questions. Debates do not consist of complex questions.
This video should rightfully be viewed as a specific and standalone debate, and if Christy hasn't asserted any claim in this specific video, then there is no burden of proof on her. End of story. Secondly, there's the comments that consist of stupid nitpicking and other avoidance tactics. You haven't defined equality, etc. Funny how the lack of a coherent definition of equality never stopped anti-feminists asserting that women have achieved equality. Again, all this nitpicking is a failure to grasp context. Despite the fact that the video is less than 100 words, all in plain English and clearly expressed, they appear to have missed even the most basic context of what is being said. Christy is allowing people to use their own definition of equality, which...
Well, let's have a look at question 2 and determine whether that last statement was actually true or not. And if we look at question 2, it's obvious, looking at the simple English, that the only option that you have are metrics. Identify the metrics you are using to determine women's equality. Equality is not defined, nor are we given license as to selecting our own version of equality.
I think is very charitable, and isn't specifying what metrics people need to use. Again, very charitable. Christy isn't defining the terms of the argument. She is asking you if you can prove your own argument by your own definition and your own choice of metrics, which means that any of your nitpicking objections about definitions could actually be factored into your arguments. How much more charitable can you get?
That is not the definition of philosophical charity. The principle of philosophical charity is in a situation where your opponent makes an ambiguous argument, or your opponent equivocates between 2 terms, the charitable thing to do is to select the term that best fits the intended argument or the presumed argument, therefore making your opponent's argument stronger. Philosophical charity is not assuming that your opponent is making the strongest argument. That's just nonsense. Philosophical charity is interpreting your opponent's argument in the best possible light.
The last resort of intellectual cowards is to retreat to arguing from hypothetical situations. If I try to attempt to answer these questions, she'll just say I was wrong. You don't know until you try. And if you try and she says you're wrong, then use some mental flexibility to respond to that reaction. Though I appreciate most anti-feminists have an incredible lack.
We'll pause here because this is interesting, isn't it? There's an unstated assumption, and the assumption is that Dr. Winters is correct. It's a little bit like magician's choice, isn't it? When a magician offers you a set of cards and asks you to select a card or point to a card, and then the magician takes the opposite card. It doesn't matter which card you point at, the magician will take the card that he requires to perform his conjuring trick. It's magician's choice. Dr. Winters has to be right. If you make the argument and she says that you're wrong, well, there's no option that she might be wrong.
Of mental flexibility, as evidenced by the fact that they keep arguing that black is white, even when their assertions are proven wrong, such as the person on this comment thread accusing Christie of conducting a survey. No matter how wrong their position is, they can rarely be flexible and adaptive in a discussion, and will just keep restating their original point over and over again until we all die of boredom, as evidenced so many times in the comment section here.
In conclusion then, I'd like to say a few things because I did skip over a few items in the video itself. One point I'd like to make is in relation to the burden of proof. Now, it seems obvious to me, and I think most reasonable people, that the burden of proof rests with the individual making the claim. And that would be you, Dr. Winters, because you are the one making the claim. The other point I'd like to make is in relation to the argument itself. It seems peppered with derogatory statements in relation to the people who criticise the first video. Calling people mentally defective is not the way to win hearts and minds, is it, Dr. Winters? And it's no good hiding behind the fact that this was written by somebody else. It's presented and narrated by yourself. You're supposed to be an academic. My final point is in relation to the nature of the questions set by Dr. Winters in the original video. For instance, if we take the list of Western countries, well, that would depend on how we define a Western country. There is no single or correct list of Western countries because it's contextual. Different people will come up with different lists. The question itself is ambiguous. Given the criteria set by Dr. Winters, it would be impossible for people to come up with a single, consistent response. And Dr. Winters would have been fully aware of this when she set the questions. It was deliberately set so it was unanswerable if he wanted to satisfy the criteria demanded by Dr. Winters. So the question itself, as it was presented, is at best disingenuous. So the correct response would have been to challenge the validity of the questions themselves. It would have been perfectly reasonable to challenge Dr. Winters on the nature of the question itself. Anyway, thank you for listening, and I hope to see you next time.